With Kojima having revealed new Death Stranding footage at the Game Awards for 2 years straight now, many were hoping that we would see more of the game during this year's Game Awards. But if you tuned in to Game Awards 2018, then you will know that Kojima's upcoming game and Kojima himself were nowhere to be found. Kojima hinted as much on Twitter when he tweeted at Jeff Keighley that he couldn't make it this year, but Kojima being Kojima, people wondered if he was actually telling the truth or if this was another one of his infamous misdirections. This time it turned out to be that he was telling the truth, which means we'll have to wait until 2019 until we get more footage, hopefully extensive gameplay. Also in the pipeline is a special visit from Conan O'Brien as part of his Trip to Japan series. While most of those videos are already up on Conan's official website and YouTube channel, he stated in a recent live-streamed Q&A that as far as his visit to Kojima goes, he was asked to wait until a certain time after more of the game has been revealed before posting that segment, implying that Conan saw more of the game during his visit than most people have thus far. With Game Awards 2018 having come and gone, and with Sony not attending E3 2019, it's hard to say for sure when we can expect the next major Death Stranding unveiling, but suffice to say that something is definitely looming on the horizon, that we're currently in the calm before the storm. Now, until then, fortunately, there is new information we can glean at from an interview that Death Stranding star Norman Reedus, who plays the protagonist Sam, participated in with Dan Fogler, who has his own podcast. At one point, he was asked about the video game he was currently working on, and Norman actually had a surprising amount of things to say about it. First up, he discussed what it's been like to work with Kojima all this time, stating the following.
It is,
Do you like doing that?
I've never done the kind that I'm doing on this. This is a whole nother level, and I've been in a lot of video games, but nothing like this. And, Guillermo del Toro, he just wrote me, and he and Hideo and I were supposed to do a different game. And that game kind of fell apart because Hideo and that company kind of fell apart. It was Kojima and Konami. They kind of broke up in Japan, and
Right.
Sony picked up Hideo, and he started his own thing at Sony. But so we started this other one. Guillermo was like, "You should do this." Like, I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "You should do this." And then I met Hideo, and he took me to the Video Game Music Awards, right? And he comes walking down the steps, and the steps are lighting up underneath him, and he's like, "I'm back," and then 10,000 grown men with tears in their eyes are screaming like Elvis just walked in. And I'm like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Like,
My childhood.
I mean, he's like a genius. And then you talk to him, and you're like, "Oh, you are a genius." And then he would actually be great to direct like movies and stuff, because you'll say, "You know what, maybe I should do it over here like this," and he'll go, "You know what, why don't you add this on top of it?" So he doesn't go, no, I see it that way. He goes, whatever you bring to him, he just adds a couple of more ingredients. He goes, "Well, try that then," and you're like, beautiful. It's even greater. And then but
that's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, man.
Yeah, but his explanations of stuff and the way his mind works is he's the real deal genius for sure.
You've gotta love how Norman still calls the Game Awards the Video Game Music Awards, and you've also gotta love that he's confusing the Game Awards with E3 2016, which was when Kojima walked down the Bridge of Light during the PlayStation press conference. But that's irrelevant. All that aside, it's good to hear about the collaborative creative effort that occurs under Kojima's wing, that he gives actors some freedom to play around, because as someone who's done theatrical productions, I know some of the best interpretations of a script and some of the best performances and ideas can come off of actors just trying different things and the director giving some leeway here and there to at least see where that goes. I think Last of Us was one of those games where Neil Druckmann, the director, allowed actors to share their input about what they feel their characters might do in certain situations, and it's changed the dynamic of certain scenes for the better. So it's cool to hear that Kojima's offering a similar level of flexibility. Now, on to the good part. When asked about details of Death Stranding and his character, Norman had a few bits of interesting information to share. Here's what he had to say.
So can you talk about like the theme of the video game? Like, what's the storyline? Can you talk about any of that, or what kind of character you play?
It's not the kind of game where you like kill everybody in the room. It's a game of bringing people together, and it's how you play it is you're building bridges from here to there, and other people are doing the same, and you connect. And the character that I play he's got this phobia of being touched, and as you play the game, the phobia leaves you. And yeah, it's complicated, but once you're in it, it doesn't seem as complicated. But it's constantly surprising you with decisions left and right, and what comes at you, and it's a real it's a brave game, but it's I mean, visually stunning, and the story behind it's a whole nother level of it's not Pac-Man. It's not.
No.
It's not simple, but the philosophy behind it is one that everybody can get.
So we all know that Kojima games have always been very philosophical, always trying to emphasize a few thematic elements and send a core message about the world and society at large. And it would seem as though Death Stranding will be no different in that regard, with themes of human evolution, of human connections, and of humans' mistreatment of the planet being among the things that I feel will be most prominent in the game's narrative. Something else he's excelled at is giving characters certain quirks that make them stand out from the pack and make them more memorable, and for Sam Porter Bridges, it would seem as though one of his quirks is that he's got a phobia of being touched. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with all those handprints Sam's got scattered throughout his body, which seemingly appear each time he dies and comes back to life. Not sure what the phobia entails from a character and storytelling standpoint, but apparently the phobia does diminish as players progress through the game, which will make it easier for them to form connections. Hearing of this, I'm also reminded of a hint that the Kojima Productions official Twitter provided, noting how a handshake symbolizes mutual friendship in many cultures, and how chiral hands, aka the left and right hands, which are mirror images of each other, can't shake, before asking what one would do if they couldn't hold hands anymore, and how one could live in a world that isn't connected. Perhaps this phobia of touch is representative of a world in which connections between people have been severed somehow, with the player's goal being to slowly reestablish those connections as Sam's phobia of touch and fear of forming connections lessens. I don't know, just throwing stuff out there, which is all we can really do right now given how little we know. Something else we don't know for sure is exactly what Kojima means by Death Stranding being a game that puts an emphasis on forming connections rather than killing everything in sight, and what he means by the game encouraging players to use the rope rather than the stick, with the only clue we have been given being something that Mads Mikkelsen let slip about how the game requires global player collaboration, and Norman at one point hinted at elements of social media playing a big role, though one can hardly deduce how that will be represented in terms of visuals and gameplay. The strands falling from the sky and the umbilical cord seen strewn about the game's various trailers are obviously very important in that regard, but their exact function is something Kojima is still guarding as a secret. Either way, the detail about Sam having a phobia of touch and that phobia becoming lesser and lesser as the game goes along seems like a pretty important detail worth keeping in mind as we continue to uncover the enigma that is Death Stranding. Now, one question most people have on their minds is when we can expect to get our hands on the game to experience what's bound to be one mindfuck of an interactive experience, and this is something that Norman was asked as well, which he touched upon by responding as follows.
When's it available? It's in development?
I think it's going to be early this coming year, and it's but I think I have 3 more sessions here in New York starting next week. Yeah, I got a couple more sessions of this. And I think there'll be maybe a part 2 or part 3, as
Sweet.
well. It's fun. It's new to me. This year's been a very new year for me.
So, first things first, I don't actually think Norman knows for sure exactly when the game's expected to launch, as early 2019 seems rather unrealistic. However, I do get the sense that performance capture for the game is wrapping up pretty soon, with Norman hinting he's only got a few more sessions to go before he's done. Not long ago, Troy Baker hinted as much during a panel he participated in at Argentina Game Show 2018, during which he said that all the recordings for his character were pretty much done after shooting for 2 weeks, while also speculating that Norman was nearly done with all of his shooting as well.
Norman and I shot for about 2 weeks on it. He's super rad. I believe I'm finished shooting. So I think my role and everything, I believe Norman's finished as well, but I could be wrong.
All around, the general vibe I'm getting is that all the work involving actors is near completion, and typically during a game development cycle, Actors tend to finish work when a project is near the final stages, so I'm going to surmise that we're getting to a point in which Kojima and team are putting the pieces of the game together. In fact, back in early November, Kojima told Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun during an interview that the game had reached polishing phase, suggesting we're only a few months away before it's finally complete, which is why, while I wouldn't expect an early 2019 release, there is a high chance that the game will launch sometime in mid or late 2019, which would still abide by the window Kojima had provided back in Tokyo Game Show 2017, during which he said that the current window is before the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and not too far off from Akira's 2019 setting. Not to mention that during this year's Tokyo Game Show, Kojima emphasized that despite a few snags here and there, the game is still on schedule. So yeah, I'm all around hopeful that Death Stranding is further along than most people think. Interestingly, Norman Reedus also commented on potential sequels for Death Stranding, stating that we might see a part 2 or a part 3, which would make this a trilogy series.
And I think there'll be maybe a part 2 or part 3.
I wouldn't take this as direct confirmation, but from what Norman is saying and from what he knows of the game's story, it looks like Death Stranding might leave enough narrative threads open towards the end for potential sequels. I also recall that Kojima did state during an interview from a while ago that while he's fully focused on making his upcoming Death Stranding its own thing, he's also not against leaving the door open to sequels assuming things go well for this project. I don't remember when and where exactly he said this, but I'm confident he's expressed this sentiment in the past, meaning a part 2 or a part 3 even isn't out of the question. However, it is too early to think about sequels, and if you ask me, I don't think Kojima's creating Death Stranding under the assumption that he'll work on 2 more of these games. He always works on every one of his projects like it might be his last, so he doesn't have a habit of going out of his way to purposely write stories in a way that they're intended to be split into multiple parts, focusing on ensuring he always ships a complete story that can stand on its own. Which is why I anticipate Death Stranding will be one of those games that can stand as a solo entry, but will have enough characters and world building that continuations may be a possibility, assuming circumstances allow for that. Personally speaking, I'm confident Death Stranding will perform quite well commercially given what a head-turner it is, and critically given Kojima's track record. I suspect this game will be well received enough across the board that making additional entries is more likely than it isn't. For now though, I'm just looking forward to seeing Kojima return with this first major project since his unceremonious departure from Konami and since his separation from the Metal Gear franchise. It'll be interesting to see what Kojima can do when pursuing new AAA ventures without creative restrictions imposed by his previous employer and amidst friendlier partners over at Sony. Anyway, that's all the information I have to share for now, so with that, I would like to end this Death Stranding news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content and would like to support this channel directly, consider donating on Patreon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.